I'm trying to stay out of trouble, but trouble just find the fuck out of me. Trouble just find the fuck out of me.
Confident that something's not right. This is not her normal behavior.
They release her and let her come home. We just want her home.
Houston police say this man has been arrested in connection with the disappearance of a Houston woman.
Details on the missing Houston woman who was last seen getting into a van outside of the bikini bar where she worked as a dancer.
This story takes us to Houston, Texas, the fourth largest city in the United States and a thriving center of culture, industry, and innovation.
On September 21st, 2023, Deundrea Ford, age 21, left her workplace, Diva's Bikini Sports Bar and Grill, located in Houston, Texas. Surveillance footage shows her entering a white van with an unidentified male around 1 a.m. They remained in the vehicle for over an hour before it left the premises. That was the last visual record of her. At approximately 2 a.m., she attempted to make a phone call. That call was not completed. She did not return home. She was reported missing shortly after. Law enforcement obtained surveillance footage, traced the white van, and identified the male as 51-year-old Yolan J. Washington. Washington had a prior criminal record. Clothing belonging to him was collected and tested. The results confirmed Deundrea Ford's blood on those clothes. Other personal items linked to Ford were found in his possession. Despite no body being recovered at the time, Washington was charged with murder in January 2024. On March 15th, 2024, skeletal remains were discovered in a drainage culvert in Dallas. Due to decomposition, immediate identification was not possible. In September 2024, forensic analysis confirmed the remains as belonging to Deundrea Ford. She had previously been identified as a key witness in a May 2023 capital murder case. Court documents showed she had received threats related to that case. This case is now under formal prosecution. Evidence includes surveillance, DNA, digital records, and recovered remains. Welcome to True Crime Unmasked. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories. The show where we uncover the disturbing crimes tearing communities apart and the haunting truths hidden behind closed doors. These are real stories, real individuals, real consequences. Stay tuned for more captivating stories. Now, let's begin. Deundrea Ford was a 21-year-old woman residing in Houston, Texas. She worked as a dancer at Diva's Bikini Sports Bar and Grill, a known adult entertainment venue located along the East Freeway. Records show that she was a mother. There is no significant public history of criminal involvement or arrests linked to her name. She maintained regular contact with her friends, co-workers, and immediate family. She was described by those close to her as quiet, observant, and independent. Her employment was consistent, and she was known to keep to herself at work and outside of it. She had a small but active social circle, primarily made up of colleagues in the club and a few longtime friends. Her digital footprint was minimal, with only occasional public social media activity. Law enforcement noted that there were no red flags or prior reports involving her that would suggest she was a person of interest in any ongoing criminal investigation. There were, however, documented records showing that she had been interviewed by law enforcement a few months earlier as a potential witness in a homicide investigation. At that time, she had not been placed in protective custody and was not under surveillance or police watch. On the evening of September 20th, 2023, Deundrea Ford reported to work at Diva's Bikini Sports Bar and Grill. She arrived during the usual business hours and followed her standard routine. There were no disturbances reported at the club that night. According to club security logs and staff interviews, she interacted with male customer multiple times over the course of her shift. Surveillance footage from both inside and outside the club later confirmed this interaction. The footage showed a man, later identified through investigation as Yolan J. Washington, entering the premises and speaking with Deundrea. No aggressive behavior or confrontation was observed in the footage. Staff did not report anything unusual about the exchange at the time. The man paid for drinks and remained in the club for several hours. At approximately 1 a.m. on September 21st, 2023, Deandrea was seen voluntarily leaving the building with the man. Multiple cameras captured her walking alongside him toward the parking lot. They were seen entering a white van parked nearby. According to timestamps and footage angles, they both entered the front passenger area, and the vehicle remained stationary in the parking lot for over an hour. From 1 a.m. to 2:05 a.m., the van stayed in place. It did not move, nor did anyone else approach the vehicle. During this window, there were no calls made from the vehicle, according to data retrieved later from Deandrea's phone records, except for a single outgoing call placed at approximately 2 a.m. This call was not answered. The recipient has not been publicly identified, but law enforcement confirmed that the call connected for only a few seconds before dropping. After 2:05 a.m., surveillance shows the van pulling out of the parking lot and heading eastbound on the freeway. No further footage was captured of the vehicle on nearby traffic or toll cameras. Deundrea Ford was not seen or heard from again after this moment. Subsequent calls made to her phone went straight to voicemail. Text messages were not delivered. Her family and close contact attempted to reach her throughout the morning and afternoon of September 21st. On the morning of September 22nd, 2023, Deundrea Ford's family officially reported her missing to law enforcement. She had failed to return home after her shift at Diva's Bikini Sports Bar and Grill. Her phone was off, her social media inactive, and there was no trace of her whereabouts. This marked the start of an investigation by Houston police. The initial step in the investigation was to establish a last known location. Officers confirmed that Deandrea had been seen leaving the club shortly after 1 a.m. on September 21st, 2023. Surveillance footage from the club's parking lot showed her entering a white van belonging to a male patron who had spent the evening at the establishment. Both she and the man were seen sitting in the van for over an hour before it departed the premises. With no communication from Deandrea after approximately 2 a.m., the investigation turned toward tracing the vehicle. Investigators canvassed nearby businesses, highways, and traffic cameras for additional footage that could capture the route of the van as it exited the area. The footage confirmed that the vehicle left eastbound on the East Freeway, heading away from central Houston. The vehicle was not immediately identified. Police released a public bulletin requesting assistance in locating the van and the unidentified man who had been with Deandrea that night. At this stage, she was considered a missing person, and the case had not yet been classified as foul play. However, internal police notes acknowledged the high-risk nature of her disappearance due to the circumstances of her last sighting and her lack of contact with anyone after the incident. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a significant detail in Deandrea's background. She was listed as a key witness in an ongoing capital murder case involving a man named Otis Parker. The incident had taken place in May 2023. According to police reports, Deandrea had been inside a vehicle during a targeted shooting that resulted in Parker's death. She escaped the scene physically unharmed, but her presence during the homicide made her a material witness in the investigation. The case file revealed that threats had been made against Deandrea after she provided a statement to police. These threats were documented and included in court records. However, despite the existence of these threats, no formal protection order or witness security measures were applied to her. At the time of her disappearance, she was still scheduled to testify in the upcoming trial related to Parker's murder. This raised a key question for investigators. Was her disappearance a coincidence, or was it connected to her role as a witness in a high-profile murder case? Law enforcement began to examine all communications, social media posts, and phone records leading up to the date of her disappearance. There was no indication that Deandrea had made plans to leave voluntarily. Her last phone activity, a call placed around 2 a.m. on the night she vanished, went unanswered and disconnected shortly afterward. Authorities concluded that she was not reachable after that point. As part of the probe, Houston PD also examined whether anyone involved in the Otis Parker case had contact with Deandrea shortly before her disappearance. No direct links were confirmed. However, the possibility of retaliation or silencing due to her pending testimony remained a viable investigative theory. Progress on the case accelerated in late 2023 when the white van from the surveillance footage was finally identified. It was Tracy Yolan J. Washington, a 51-year-old male with a criminal history that included charges for assault and unlawful restraint. His name had come up earlier in unrelated investigations, and police now had a positive match between his vehicle and the one seen in the footage. Further investigation revealed that Washington had been present at Diva's Bikini Sports Bar on the night Deandrea disappeared. Multiple surveillance angles confirmed him leaving the premises with her. Police obtained a warrant and conducted a search of his property and belongings. Inside Washington's residence and vehicle, they discovered items stained with blood. Forensic analysis determined that the blood DNA belonged to Deundrea Ford. Despite the absence of a body at that point, authorities concluded there was sufficient evidence to charge Washington with her murder. On January 11, 2024, Washington was formally charged with murder in Dallas County. He was arrested and booked with a bail set at $1.1 million. At the time of his arrest, the case had not yet transitioned to a body recovery. It remained a no-body homicide case, an increasingly accepted legal strategy when DNA, circumstantial, and forensic evidence strongly supports the occurrence of a killing. Washington refused to speak with investigators following his arrest. He declined legal interviews and immediately secured a defense attorney. His team filed motions to suppress specific surveillance and forensic materials, challenging the chain of custody and context of the evidence. Authorities in Harris County, where the disappearance occurred, filed to extradite Washington from Dallas County. As of early 2024, he awaited extradition proceedings, while being held in custody on the strength of the murder charge. Law enforcement clarified that, even without the recovery of Deandrea's body, the evidence against Washington was comprehensive. Surveillance footage placed him at the scene. His clothing contained her DNA. Her last known location was inside his vehicle. Her phone stopped transmitting data after entering his van. Despite these factors, Washington maintained his innocence. He entered a not guilty plea during his arraignment. Surveillance footage captured from Diva's Bikini Sports Bar and Grill showed Deundrea Ford on the night of September 20th, 2023, interacting with a male customer later identified as Yolan J. Washington. The footage confirmed that Ford entered a white van with Washington around 1 a.m. on September 21st. They remained inside the vehicle for over an hour. At approximately 2 a.m., the van was seen leaving the premises. This was the last confirmed sighting of Deundrea Ford alive. Following her disappearance, authorities retrieved surveillance footage from surrounding businesses. Footage captured the white van along various routes heading toward Dallas, Texas. Investigators used plate recognition and surveillance timestamps to track the vehicle's movement. The route taken by the van matched with Washington's cell phone location data for that night, creating a digital trail placing him with Ford after she was last seen. Upon executing a search warrant, police recovered clothing from Washington's residence. The items were submitted for forensic analysis. Laboratory testing detected human blood on multiple clothing items. A DNA match confirmed the blood belonged to Deundrea Ford. This biological evidence placed Ford in direct contact with Washington after her disappearance and strongly suggested foul play. Authorities also searched Washington's vehicle. Inside the van, investigators recovered several items that forensic teams identified as being connected to Ford. These included a bracelet consistent with photos of Ford on the night she went missing, as well as a partial hair extension similar to those she was wearing in surveillance footage. DNA analysis on these items returned profiles matching Ford's known genetic material. The evidence confirmed that she had been inside the van beyond what was visible on surveillance video. Additional data from Washington's cell phone was extracted. Messages, deleted call logs, and app location tracking showed a route from Houston to Dallas. Around 4:30 a.m. on September 21st, the phone was in a remote industrial area of Dallas. That same location would later become the site of a key discovery. Digital forensics also retrieved time-stamped search history and app usage from Washington's device. In the days following Ford's disappearance, there were browser searches related to decomposition timelines, surveillance camera evasion, and how to delete location history. While these did not provide direct evidence of homicide, they contributed to establishing intent and concealment behavior post-incident. All collected evidence, including video surveillance, blood-stained clothing, location data, and physical objects found in the vehicle were presented in a combined forensic timeline. Investigators concluded that Deundrea Ford was in Washington's van beyond the last public sighting, suffered physical harm resulting in bleeding, and was transported toward the area where her remains were ultimately located. On March 15, 2024, nearly 6 months after Deundrea Ford was last seen, skeletal remains were discovered in a drainage culvert in southern Dallas, Texas. A city maintenance crew performing routine inspection work noticed partial skeletal exposure within a remote area of the culvert. The discovery was immediately reported to law enforcement. Upon arrival, Dallas County investigators secured the scene. The remains were located in an advanced state of decomposition, indicating that the body had been exposed to environmental conditions for an extended period. Due to the state of the remains, immediate identification was not possible. Medical examiners recovered the full set of skeletal remains, along with remnants of clothing. Among the findings were a partial top, undergarments, and fragments of a jacket consistent with the outfit Ford was last seen wearing in surveillance footage. The clothing was submitted to forensic laboratories for fiber comparison and further biological testing. Personal effects were minimal. No wallet, phone, or identification documents were found. However, investigators found a partial earring and a synthetic hair bundle consistent with the type worn by Ford. These items were documented and cross-checked with missing persons records from the region. Dental records were requested from Ford's family. However, due to the condition of the skull, a conclusive match could not be established immediately through dental comparison alone. Forensic analysts proceeded with advanced DNA testing, using samples from the bone marrow of the recovered femur. The DNA testing process was prolonged due to the degradation of biological material. Initial results confirmed the remains belonged to a young African-American female, but additional testing was required for positive identification. Investigators sent the samples to a specialized forensic lab in Texas, equipped to handle degraded DNA. In September 2024, the results were returned. The DNA profile generated from the remains was matched against known samples provided by Deundrea Ford's family, including her mother and son. The identity was confirmed. The remains found in the Dallas drainage culvert were officially declared to be Deundrea Ford. This discovery concluded a major portion of the missing person investigation. With both forensic evidence and skeletal recovery, law enforcement now had physical confirmation of death and a geographical endpoint to her disappearance. This also shifted the case from a missing persons investigation to a homicide prosecution with physical remains as evidence. The exact cause of death could not be determined due to the condition of the remains. No visible fractures or trauma were preserved in the skeleton. However, the surrounding evidence, including blood evidence, surveillance tracking, and DNA confirmation, allowed prosecutors to proceed with the murder case. Washington remained in custody following his arrest in January 2024. The discovery of Ford's remains further strengthened the prosecution's case. The evidence now formed a complete arc. The victim's last sighting, surveillance tracking, forensic evidence, and the recovery of the body. Authorities included the location of the remains in their timeline of events and cited it as a critical component, proving Washington's movement and intent. The area in which the body was found aligned directly with the cell tower data collected from Washington's phone on the night Ford disappeared. Following the identification of Deundrea Ford's remains in September 2024, legal proceedings began against the primary suspect, Yolan J. Washington, in the 337th District Court in Houston, Texas. The charges filed included first-degree murder, tampering with a corpse, and sexual assault in 2 unrelated prior cases. The indictment came after a months-long investigation, during which authorities built a case primarily through forensic evidence, digital tracking, and surveillance footage. The prosecution submitted a motion to try Washington on the basis of circumstantial and forensic evidence, citing the seriousness of the charges and the nature of the crime. The prosecution alleges that Washington deliberately killed Deundrea Ford sometime after the early morning hours of September 21, 2023. Although there were no witnesses to the killing, the combination of forensic data, timeline analysis, and recovered biological evidence formed the foundation of the murder charge. The charge relates to the concealment and disposal of Deundrea's body in a drainage culvert located in Dallas. The body was found 6 months after her disappearance in an advanced state of decomposition. Forensic investigators tied the location and conditions to an intentional act of disposal. 2 prior accusations of sexual assault, both involving different victims, were added to Washington's record and scheduled for trial separately. DNA evidence collected from a Ford investigation cross-linked Washington to at least one of these previous sexual assault allegations. In late 2024, pre-trial motions and hearings began. The prosecution team led by the Harris County District Attorney's Office initiated the legal process with requests for digital forensic admissions, DNA confirmations, and video footage authentication. The defense questioned the admissibility of certain evidence, particularly surveillance footage from the club's parking lot, the chain of custody for biological samples, the interpretation of cell tower and location data from Washington's phone. A primary argument from the defense revolved around the lack of eyewitnesses to the crime itself. They claimed that while the evidence might place Washington and Deandrea in the same location, it does not prove a murder occurred or that Washington was a perpetrator. The defense team pushed to exclude parts of the forensic trail, arguing they were circumstantial and lacked definitive connection to an act of murder. The prosecution countered with a focus on the sequence of events shown on surveillance, Washington's criminal history, including prior sexual assault accusations, text messages and deleted app data from his device, showing contact with Deandrea on the night of the disappearance, blood evidence found on Washington's clothing that matched Deandrea's DNA. A special forensic analyst from the Texas Department of Public Safety testified during the pre-trial phase, confirming that the degradation and placement of the body were consistent with long-term concealment and deliberate dumping. The media began regular reporting on the hearings. Outlets across Texas highlighted the absence of protective measures for witnesses like Deundrea and questioned how someone known to be under threat could vanish without immediate law enforcement intervention. The legal team for the state submitted a list of prior reports indicating Deundrea was a key witness in the Otis Parker capital murder case, suggesting motive for her elimination. A gag order was requested to prevent pre-trial publicity from influencing jury selection, but was denied due to the overwhelming public interest in the case. The legal proceedings triggered immediate public and institutional responses. Houston Police Department held multiple briefings. In these, they reaffirmed the risks associated with being a material witness in high-profile murder investigations, acknowledged past threats made toward Deandrea in connection to the Otis Parker case, stated that while she was not under formal witness protection, she had been flagged as someone at potential risk. Despite these acknowledgments, law enforcement received public backlash for perceived inaction following Deandrea's disappearance. Critics pointed to a 48-hour delay in escalating her case from missing to endangered despite her history of being threatened. The public organized several community forums and gatherings across Houston and Dallas. These forums focus on the need for automatic protective protocols for witnesses in capital murder cases, demanding reforms in how threats are handled, particularly when coming from suspects awaiting trial or known gang affiliates, concerns that Deandrea's death was preventable if law enforcement had acted on early warnings. Neighborhood organizations launched petitions demanding an independent review of how Deandrea's missing person case was handled, new legislation requiring local prosecutors to coordinate with victim services for temporary relocation of threatened witnesses. At multiple press conferences, community leaders and local clergy demanded judicial accountability. They emphasized that while the trial would determine guilt, procedural failures needed to be addressed regardless of outcome. Hashtags calling for justice in the case trended on platforms such as Twitter, now X, Facebook, and Instagram. The viral nature of the case drew comparisons to other high-profile failures in witness protection, and journalists began documenting patterns of witnesses being killed or attacked before testimony. News anchors and columnists highlighted gaps in law enforcement coordination. Deandrea's last known contact was never geolocated in real time. There were no formal security measures in place, despite documented threats. Her family had reportedly contacted police several times in the days leading to her disappearance. City council members and one Texas state legislator began pushing a new bill nicknamed Deandrea's Law, designed to provide emergency protection orders for material witnesses. Allocate state funds or temporary housing and security detail for at-risk witnesses in violent crime cases. Mandate law enforcement to immediately classify disappearances of flag witnesses as high-risk cases. If this story touched you deeply and made you question what's real, be sure to tap the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. For more gripping true crime stories that unravel the hidden truths behind heartbreaking cases, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest episodes, investigations, and powerful conversations. Thank you for joining us on this journey to uncover the truth and fight for justice. Together, we can shine a light where it's needed most. Stay safe, stay alert, and we'll see you in the next story.